Look, I know what you're thinking when you hear my story, but honestly, I lived my best life in my 20s, and I'm not apologizing for it. I'm Susan, I'm 31, and yeah, I had fun. A lot of fun. But now, everyone's acting like I should just magically flip a switch and be some boring suburban wife who gets excited about grocery shopping and Netflix marathons. That's not how attraction works, okay? You can't just rewire your brain because society says it's time to settle down. I met Jack 3 years ago when I was trying to do exactly that. Be the good girl everyone expected me to become. He worked in supply chain management, had his shit together, steady income, nice apartment. On paper, he was perfect. Everything my therapist said I should want. We moved in together after 8 months because it made financial sense, and honestly, he was safe. Predictable. The kind of guy who'd never hurt me or disappear for 3 days without calling. But safe doesn't make your heart race, you know? Safe doesn't give you butterflies. And after years of excitement and passion and guys who kept me guessing, Jack felt like watching paint dry. Don't get me wrong, he was sweet. Too sweet, actually. Always asking about my day, wanting to plan weekend activities, talking about future goals like we were some power couple destined for greatness. I'd smile and nod, but inside I was screaming. This wasn't the life I wanted, but everyone kept telling me it was what I needed. My friend Victoria, who'd married her college boyfriend at 24, would constantly remind me how lucky I was to find a stable guy. Easy for her to say, she never experienced real passion. She settled before she even knew what she wanted. The thing is, I wasn't some naive girl who didn't know what she was doing. From 18 to about 27, I was what you'd call a party girl. I went out, I had fun, I lived without regrets. I saw a lot of guys, experienced different types of relationships, and yeah, I enjoyed myself. I wasn't going to apologize for that then, and I'm going to apologize for it now. But somewhere around 27, I started feeling this pressure. Everyone around me was coupling up, getting engaged, buying houses. The narrative was clear. If you want to be taken seriously as an adult woman, you need to find your person and settle down. So I tried. I really did. When I met Jack at a coffee shop near my office, he seemed like exactly what I was supposed to want. He was polite, asked thoughtful questions, had a stable career, and wasn't trying to get me into bed on the first date. He was relationship material, the kind of guy you bring home to meet your parents. We started dating and everything was fine. He was attentive, remembered details about my life, planned nice dates. But there was something missing. That spark, that electricity that makes you think about someone constantly when they're not around. With Jack, I felt comfortable. But comfort isn't the same as passion. Still, I kept telling myself this was what mature relationships looked like. Maybe the butterflies and excitement were just immature fantasies. Maybe real love was supposed to feel safe and predictable. Everyone certainly seemed to think so. When Jack suggested we move in together, it made practical sense. We were spending most nights together anyway, and splitting rent would save us both money. Plus, Victoria kept saying how moving in together was the natural next step in a serious relationship. So we found a decent 2-bedroom apartment and started playing house. That's when the suffocation really began. Living with Jack was like being wrapped in cotton, soft, safe, and completely airless. He had routines for everything. Sunday grocery shopping, Thursday date nights, Saturday morning gym sessions. He wanted to do everything together, as if being in a relationship meant becoming one person instead of two people choosing to be together. I started feeling claustrophobic, but whenever I tried to express this, Jack would get this concerned look and want to work through it together. Everything had to be discussed and analyzed and resolved like we were in permanent couples counseling. God, the talking. If I seemed quiet, he wanted to know what was wrong. If I wanted alone time, he needed to understand why. If I wasn't in the mood for sex, we had to have a conversation about our intimacy needs. The worst part was that he was genuinely trying to be a good boyfriend. He wasn't controlling or manipulative, he was just boring. Predictably, suffocatingly boring. And that made me feel like a terrible person for wanting more. Living with Jack was like being suffocated by kindness. He'd leave little notes in my lunch, remember every random thing I mentioned wanting, and always wanted to talk through any issues. God, the talking. Everything had to be discussed and analyzed and resolved like we were in couples therapy 24/7. When I'd come home stressed from work, he'd immediately go into fix-it mode instead of just letting me vent. "What can we do to make tomorrow better?" he'd ask. And I wanted to scream that sometimes shit just sucks, and you don't need a solution. I started staying out later with Victoria and my coworkers, hitting up the bars we used to frequent. Jack would text asking when I'd be home, and I'd feel this surge of irritation. I'm a grown woman. I don't need to check in like some teenager. But if I brought this up, he'd get that hurt puppy dog look and explain he was just worried, which somehow made me feel like the bad guy. The sex became routine too. Same positions, same timing, same gentle approach. He'd ask what I wanted, and honestly, I wanted him to just take charge for once. I wanted unpredictability. I wanted to feel desired, not accommodated. But saying that would hurt his feelings. And then we'd have another 3-hour conversation about our intimacy needs. Meanwhile, I'd catch myself checking out other guys when we were out together. Guys with edge, with mystery, with that dangerous energy that used to drive me wild. Jack noticed my wandering attention and suggested we try new restaurants, take weekend trips, join a gym together. More activities to bond over, as if boredom was something you could schedule your way out of. He'd plan these elaborate surprise dates, thinking that romance was about grand gestures rather than genuine chemistry. I remember one night he surprised me with a picnic set up in our living room, candles, takeout from my favorite restaurant, even a playlist of our songs. It was sweet, it was thoughtful, and it made me want to cry because I felt absolutely nothing. Here was this man putting effort into making me happy. And all I could think about was how I'd rather be anywhere else. The guilt was almost worse than the boredom. How do you tell someone they're trying too hard? How do you explain that their love feels like a cage? I started making excuses to avoid his planned activities. Work was crazy, I was tired, I had plans with Victoria. Each time I bailed, he'd reschedule rather than get upset, which somehow made it worse. I found myself comparing him to guys from my past. The way Brad used to text me at random times just to say something dirty that would make me blush at work. How Caleb would show up at my apartment unannounced with takeout, and we'd end up having sex on the kitchen counter. The uncertainty, the passion, the feeling that anything could happen. With Jack, I always knew exactly what was going to happen. Friday nights were date nights, dinner and a movie, maybe some wine and predictable sex afterward. Saturdays were for errands and meal prep. Sundays were for laundry and Netflix. It was like being married to a schedule instead of a person. 2 years in, I started feeling trapped. Jack would make these comments about our future, talking about engagement timelines and kids like they were inevitable. He'd assumed I wanted the whole package just because I'd moved in with him. The thought of marrying him, of signing up for a lifetime of this suffocating stability made me panic. But breaking up felt impossible too. What was I gonna say? You're too nice? You're too predictable? How do you tell someone they're everything wrong with your life when they're technically everything right? I became passive-aggressive instead. I'd forget to text back, show up late to his work events, cancel plans last minute. When he'd get frustrated, I'd turn it around on him. "You're being controlling," I'd say, or "I need space to breathe." He'd back down immediately, apologizing for being needy, which only made me resent him more. A real man would have called me on my bullshit. Instead, Jack would try harder, cooking my favorite meals, planning surprise date nights, buying thoughtful gifts. Each gesture felt like another chain around my neck. I started reconnecting with guys from my past on social media. Nothing serious, just casual conversations that reminded me what excitement felt like. There was Tyler, who used to make my stomach flip with a single text. Austin, who was unpredictable and passionate and never boring. These guys got it. They understood chemistry and spark and the thrill of not knowing what comes next. When Jack found some of these conversations on my phone, he was helping me find a photo. He didn't even get properly angry. He just asked if we needed to work on our relationship. That's when I knew for sure I was with the wrong man. I started fantasizing about my old life, the excitement of getting ready for a night out, not knowing who I'd meet or what would happen, the thrill of a new connection, Those first few weeks when everything is electric and unpredictable. The passionate fights and make-up sex. The drama that made you feel alive. Jack never fought with me. If I started an argument, he'd want to discuss it rationally until we reached a compromise. There was no fire, no passion, no raw emotion. Just endless understanding and patience that felt more like pity than love. I remember one night I purposely picked a fight about something stupid, the way he loaded the dishwasher or forgot to replace the toilet paper. I wanted him to get angry, to show some kind of intense emotion. Instead, he calmly explained his perspective and asked how we could prevent the issue in the future. I actually yelled at him to just fight back, to stop being so fucking reasonable about everything. He looked genuinely confused and asked if I wanted him to be unreasonable. That question broke something in me. Yes, I wanted him to be unreasonable sometimes. I wanted him to be human instead of this perfect, boring robot who never did anything wrong. The final straw came during one of Jack's work parties. I was talking to this guy Iris from my office new. Tall, confident, had this edge that made every other man in the room look like boys. We were just talking, but there was this electric chemistry that I hadn't felt in years. Jack kept interrupting our conversation, bringing me drinks I didn't ask for, introducing me as his better half to anyone who'd listen. I felt embarrassed, like he was marking his territory or something. This guy, let's call him Ryan, had this amused look on his face watching Jack hover around me. When Jack went to get us more drinks, Ryan leaned in and said, "Your boyfriend seems attentive." The way he said it, with that slight smirk, made it clear what he really meant. Later that night, Jack said he noticed I seemed distant at the party and wanted to know if everything was okay. I snapped. Told him he was suffocating me, that I felt like I couldn't even have a conversation without him hovering. He looked genuinely confused, said he was just being attentive, trying to be a good boyfriend. "Maybe that's the problem," I said. "Maybe I don't want a good boyfriend." The hurt in his eyes should have made me feel guilty, but instead, I felt relief. Finally, some real emotion instead of his constant understanding and patience. We barely spoke for the next week. Jack tried to give me space while also trying to fix things. Leaving me alone, but keeping the apartment perfect, not bringing up our fight, but clearly walking on eggshells. It was exhausting. I started staying at Victoria's more often, telling Jack I needed time to think. Really, I just needed to breathe. To remember who I was before I became half of this suffocating couple unit. During one of these stays, I ran into Tyler at a bar near Victoria's place. We talked for hours, and for the first time in months, I felt alive. When he suggested we go back to his place, I didn't hesitate. It felt like coming back to life after being in a coma. The spontaneity, the passion, the way he looked at me like he actually wanted me, instead of just wanting to take care of me. This was what I'd been missing, what I'd been craving for the past 2 years. I told myself it was just one night, a moment of clarity to help me figure out what I really wanted. But one night became 2, then 3. Tyler was everything Jack wasn't: spontaneous, exciting, a little dangerous. He didn't want to talk about feelings or plan our future. He just wanted to live in the moment, which was exactly what I needed. Jack knew something was wrong, but kept trying to solve it with more communication, more effort, more of everything that was already suffocating me. When he suggested couples therapy, I nearly laughed. Therapy wasn't going to make him interesting. It wasn't going to give him the edge I craved. I told him I needed more space. Maybe we should take a break. He asked what that meant exactly, and I realized I didn't know. I just knew I couldn't keep pretending to be happy in this beige existence he called a relationship. The guilt was eating at me, but not because I'd cheated, because everyone would expect me to feel guilty. Jack was objectively a great guy. He'd make someone very happy someday. That someone just wasn't me. When I finally worked up the courage to end things properly, Jack asked if there was someone else. I could have lied, but what was the point? "Yes," I said. "But that's not why we're breaking up. We're breaking up because we want different things." He asked what Tyler had that he didn't, and I tried to explain about chemistry and excitement and compatibility. "I can change," he said. And that's when I knew he'd never understand. You can't change your fundamental nature. You can't become someone you're not, no matter how much you love someone. The conversation lasted hours. Jack wanted to understand, wanted to know what he could have done differently, wanted to know if there was any way to fix things. I kept trying to explain that it wasn't about fixing anything, we were just fundamentally incompatible. I needed excitement, unpredictability, passion. He needed stability, security, routine. But we built something together, he kept saying, and I wanted to scream that what we'd built felt like a prison to me. Our life together was everything he wanted and nothing I needed. But he couldn't see that because to him, love was about creating safety and security. I tried to be gentle, to explain that this wasn't about him being inadequate or me being ungrateful. We just wanted different things from a relationship. But every explanation I gave seemed to hurt him more, and I started getting frustrated. Why couldn't he just accept that we weren't right for each other and move on? "So all this time you've been pretending?" he asked, and I realized that in a way, I had been. I'd been playing the role of the grateful girlfriend who was happy to be in a stable relationship, when really I'd been dying inside from boredom. Jack moved out within 2 weeks, staying with his cousin while he found his own place. He was civil about the whole thing, dividing belongings fairly, handling the lease professionally. Even in Heartbreak, he was maddeningly decent. I thought I'd feel relieved, finally free to live my life without judgment or suffocation. Instead, I felt empty. Tyler and I fizzled out within a month. Turns out, guys who are exciting and unpredictable don't usually want anything serious with 31-year-old women, especially ones who just blew up their stable relationships. Shocker. The reality hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't 25 anymore. The dating pool had changed significantly and not in my favor. Most guys my age who were worth dating were either married or had learned to avoid women with my history. The ones who were available often had good reasons for being single at 33. I found myself on dating apps again, swiping through profiles of men who either looked like they'd never left their mother's basement or were clearly just looking for casual hookups. The few decent ones who matched with me seemed intimidated when they found out I'd been in a long-term relationship that ended recently. Nobody wanted to be the rebound guy. Victoria tried to be supportive, but I could tell she thought I was crazy for leaving Jack. "He was perfect for you," she'd say, and I'd have to bite my tongue to keep from screaming that perfect on paper doesn't mean perfect in reality. She'd found her person early, and couldn't understand why I was still searching for something she'd never even known existed. About 8 months after Jack moved out, Victoria mentioned that she'd seen him around town. "He looks good," she said carefully. "Happy." She didn't say it, but I could hear the accusation in her voice. He was better off without me, and everyone could see it. I started therapy, partly because I was genuinely struggling, and partly because it seemed like the responsible thing to do. My therapist kept trying to get me to examine my patterns, to understand why I sabotaged stable relationships. But I already knew why. Because stable is boring. Because predictable doesn't make you feel alive. Because sometimes love isn't enough if there's no spark. She didn't get it. Nobody did. They all acted like I'd thrown away something precious, but they didn't have to live it. They didn't have to pretend to be excited about Netflix marathons and grocery store runs. They didn't understand what it felt like to be with someone who loved you so much, they wanted to protect you from ever feeling anything intense, including passion. The months stretched on, and I found myself in the exact same situation I'd been in at 28 when I decided to get serious about relationships. Single, dating guys who wouldn't commit, feeling that familiar ache of wanting more but being unable to settle for safe. The only difference was now I was 31 instead of 28. And the window for finding what I wanted was getting smaller every day. I tried dating guys more like Tyler, exciting, unpredictable, passionate, but they were also unreliable, commitment-phobic, and usually carried more baggage than an airport carousel. The ones who were willing to settle down were usually guys like Jack, stable, boring, safe. It was like the universe was forcing me to choose between passion and security, never both. Everyone kept waiting for me to admit I'd made a mistake, to show some remorse. Friends would hint that maybe I should reach out to Jack, see if he was willing to try again. But the truth is, I wasn't sorry. I was sad things didn't work out differently. But I wasn't sorry for wanting more than settling. Maybe that makes me selfish, but at least I'm honest about what I want, even if what I want doesn't seem to exist anymore. I'd rather be alone and true to myself than in a relationship that feels like slow suffocation, even if that relationship looks perfect from the outside. 1 year after our breakup, I found out through mutual friends that Jack was engaged. Not to some rebound girl, but to someone he'd apparently been seeing for several months. Someone who, according to Victoria, seemed really well suited for him. The implication was clear. She was everything I wasn't, and more importantly, she wanted what he had to offer. I felt a strange mix of emotions hearing that news. Relief that he'd found someone who appreciated what I couldn't. Vindication that we'd been right to break up. And yes, a little sting of rejection, even though I'd been the one to leave. But mostly, I felt tired. Tired of being the woman who couldn't settle, who wanted too much, who threw away good things in search of something better that might not even exist. Tired of defending my choices to people who thought I was crazy for wanting passion over stability. The thing is, I still don't think I was wrong. I think we're all just different, and what works for some people doesn't work for others. Jack needed someone who would appreciate his steady, caring nature. I needed someone who could match my intensity and keep me guessing. Neither of us was wrong. We were just wrong for each other. But try explaining that to people who think a good relationship is one where nobody fights and everything is always comfortable. Try explaining that to a world that tells women they should be grateful for any decent man who wants to commit, regardless of whether there's any actual chemistry. At 31, I'm starting to accept that maybe what I want doesn't exist, or maybe I waited too long to find it. Maybe the choices I made in my 20s, prioritizing fun and excitement over building something lasting, have consequences I'm only now beginning to understand. But I still can't bring myself to regret those choices, because they made me who I am, and I refuse to apologize for knowing what I want, even if I can't have it.